A lightweight tarp is one of my favorite pieces of equipment to take to the woods and use for shelter. I've slept in them in the rain and the sleet and the snow, used them for shade shelters, used them for water collection. They're just a great piece of equipment. We can use them in different configurations. One of my favorites, if I know it's going to be wet, is going to be the pup tent configuration, and I'll show you how to do that. We need just some basic equipment to do it. We have to cut some stakes. Unless you want to carry your stakes with you, I prefer to cut them out there because usually I can get nice long stakes, about 12 inches or so. As big around as my thumb is what I like to go with. You can either cut them with branches, or you can split them down. Here's a couple examples. This one's split down, obviously, and this is just a branch. I like to bevel the edges of them because when I'm beating on them, that way they don't flare out as much, and you can reuse them if you want to use them for something else, especially if you have a spot that you go to all the time. So we need at least 4 of those. Something to pound the stakes in with. If you're going to use a hatchet or an axe or a hawk or something like that, use something that has a covering on the blade. That way when you're swinging it, it's not as dangerous. If you set it down and you kneel on it, you're not going to slice your knee open. So that's just a safety thing, and that's why I made this the way it is. You can also just use a bigger stick, just a beater stick, or a baton if you want to call it, or baton, whatever you want to call it. Right? It works real well. I've used it many times for stakes. And remember, when you're pounding these stakes in, you want to hold them in your hand like this, so that when you're pounding, if you slip off, you're just hitting the meat of your hand. If you slip off this way, you're hitting your knuckle and bone. Meat of your hand's a lot more forgiving. So that works pretty well. Also, I'm going to be using a ridge line, a shelter line that I carry with me. You've seen the video on me braiding an eye into it. This one's about 15-20 foot long. You can also just use a piece of 550 cord, 15-20 foot long. I like using this, number one, because I think it's neat. Number two is if I get ice or snow, it's a little bit stronger than a regular piece of 550 cord. I'm also going to use 4 pieces of 550 cord for my corners to stake those out. I'm going to use white at this time of year because it's a little bit easier to see, but not too obnoxious like red or orange or something like that. The tarp I'm using today is made by Etowah Outfitters. It's made for Bushcraft USA. It has more tabs than the standard tarp does, so once again, you get that configuration differential that you can just set up different types of tarps all the time, and your imagination is the only limit that you have to it. Instead of grommets, the reason we like tabs is they're easier to fix in the field. Grommets can tear out pretty easy. I've never had one of these tear out, and they've been in some pretty nasty situations. But a real solid tarp, 10 by 10, great tarp. They're you know, a little bit more expensive than one of your blue poly tarps, but they're going to last a whole lot longer, and they pack up very small. They pack up and fit inside this bag right here very easily. They just, I think, a little bit over a pound, but not much. Great piece of equipment. I've got a couple of them, and I'll be doing videos in the future also on how to set those up and do different things with them. Also, the site we're going to use in between that tree and that tree, I want nice and flat, open area, no widow makers or anything hanging above me, and we'll get to business and get this thing going. Alright, we've got a couple of trees here. I'm going to set this thing up. The first thing I'm going to do is put up my ridge line. This one I've got my eye right here. Go about chest high-ish. Run my line through there. Got a little tangle. There we go. We'll go over to my other one. I'm going to leave quite a bit of slack in it, and you'll see why later. And just to hold this here, I'm going to tie a taunt line hitch. Now these knots that I'm talking about, Gab did videos and pictorials of how to tie them, and they're on the Bush Class USA on Bushcraft USA. So you can go see how to tie them there. I'm going to find the middle of my tarp. 10 by 10. It has a seam right down the middle. Now find a stick. I'm going to take a bite, and this is why we leave it loose, so we'll be able to adjust it later. And I'll show this up closer. I take a bite, and I put it through my tab, and put the stick through it, and it serves as a toggle. Find the same one down here on the seam. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'll take a bite of my line, stick it through the tab, and you can do this with a grommet also, and then stick my toggle through it. Now I can use this to tension it, tension my tarp on my line, then to end it here, dictates. Pull it high, about chest high-ish, pull it tight, tie a taut line hitch. Use that to adjust it and get it a little bit tighter. I want it just a little tighter. There we go. Now you can do a lot of different knots on here. You can do a trucker's hitch, you can do all kinds of different stuff, and that's up to you. But the point is that you want it tight. Alright, now. Alright, this is what I'm talking about with the toggles. I took a bite and I went up through the loop or the grommet and put a stick through it. And that's going to help me to adjust this when I had more slack in it. And that's all there is to it. Alright, for the corners, now that I have my main structure up, I want to take my line, a stake, and a beater stick or a hatchet or whatever, and I want to attach my line onto here. I can do this several ways. I can do a girth hitch, or like in the bush class we talked about doing 2 half hitches. Alright, that's going to cinch down on there. Now what I want to do is pull it out. And this 90, I want to come 45 off this 90. I'll measure it out where I want my stake, about right there. I'm sure you can see this. Alright, my stake is angled back. I want to hold on to it. Put it into the ground. I want to come around the bottom of my stake and tie a taut line hitch. This is where the taut line hitch shines, because I'll be able to adjust it later on. Alright, I put my other stake in the other side. Now I'm going to adjust it and tighten it up on this side. Take this taut line hitch, pull it down tight. That put a little crease in it, so that means I need to tighten the other side. There we go. Nice and tight. I'll finish out the other side. Alright, the whole thing's all set up. You notice the pitch on it. It's nice and steep, so water or snow will come off it easy. If you're expecting super wet, heavy snow or a lot of snow, you're going to have to beef this up a lot more. Instead of using a line, you have to use a pole. But for even a heavy rain, this is going to work real well for you. It's going to keep the rain off you, and it's going to keep the rain off your gear. You can see how much room there is in there just compared to that Condor 2 pack right there. I've slept in these many nights. I've had a lot of friends that have slept in these. Great shelter, very basic, works well. Give it a shot.